Brought to you by Bank of Baroda, India's international bank. Ye Pingo. Call more, pay less.
Hello and welcome to Chai Chat with Lavina. Today we are talking about an extremely important issue hosted by Democracy Forum, a seminar that they did very recently on it, which is the changed Afghanistan, US policy in Afghanistan. What will it do for Afghanistan? And the region is what we are adding. Just to quickly give an overview, if I'm right. First of all, I think I should introduce my panel, which is absolutely wonderful. All the way from US, two people here.
That's right.
Professor Johnson.
Yes.
He is the National Security Affairs Department.
At the Naval Postgraduate School.
From the Naval Postgraduate School, of course. And not governor yet, but ambassador, ex-diplomat, Afghan diplomat, and also the CEO of Silk Route, all the way from Washington, Mr. Omar Samad. Thank you very, very much. And Nasir Anzoor. From Afghan Youth Society, also economist, but the Afghan youth voice. We are all youth here, though. We all insist we are.
That's right.
But should I just interrupt if I'm wrong? Afghanistan, just to give a little bit of background into Afghanistan. I know everybody knows that, but still, very quickly, that it became in the 80s a kind of battleground for the US Russia Cold War fought through Pakistan. The Mujahideens, post that, apparently it is said that traveled all over and caused a lot of issues in other countries as well. And so some people see that as the root cause of a lot of problems that exist at this point in time in the world. But the US Army had to return after that war in 2001, around 2001. And since then the US troops have been there, and it's been argued between the governments in the US that whether these troops should remain, whether the country has got back to his feet, have they been able to equip the Afghan state and the army enough for it to stand on its own 2 feet. Now recently in the speech a few months back, President Trump seems to have changed his strategy towards Afghanistan, and the question today is whether that works for Afghanistan as well as the world and the region around it. So first let's take on Afghanistan. Should I quickly, though all of us can talk whenever you like. I am hardly a leader in this.
Well,
but could
I personally wouldn't call the changes in U.S. policy a change in, quote, strategy, because a strategy implies some type of end state goal. And Trump's speech, President Trump's speech, never talked about what the end state was relative to his change in plans for Afghanistan. He talked about reforms that needed to be implemented, but he never talked about the type of reforms. And the big thing about it, from my perspective, is he was much harder on Pakistan, and he called for India to play a much more active role in the conflict. And I think that was the major change, and I think that could have a significant result.
So to our understanding, and for understanding of people who don't know really the change, what I understand is, one, he said that President Trump said that we are not going to count the troops or define a timeline. We're going to look at the end goal.
But we know how many troops are being.
Yes.
We're going to look at conditions.
Condition-based policy change, and not the number-based policy. And we are training the Afghan army. That's the first goal.
To bolster the Afghan army,
and second is that to combat, so confront terrorists, but not nation building. So these 3 things stood out for me. No timeline, condition-based strategy, helping the Afghan army to stand on its feet, combating terrorism, but no nation building.
But I think the other item that is very important that you alluded to is more pressure on Pakistan or any country in the region that harbors terrorists and that provides safe havens and sanctuaries. Now, we have yet to see what that means, because rhetorically he said it, as far as planning, operations, and implementation is concerned, we don't yet know which tactical issues will be involved in this.
Well, we know a couple of things. We know that we now presently have 3,000 more troops in Afghanistan to 14,000. Now, I'm not convinced, and there's also 6,000 international, so there's about 20,000 international troops now in Afghanistan. I think it's very important to recognize that at the height of NATO and U.S. involvement, ISAF involvement, we had 154,000 troops. So I'm not at all convinced on the number side that it's going to make much of a difference. And especially considering that the Afghan National Security Forces are in very rough shape right now. Last year they had 6,500 killed, the most since the beginning of the war. And they're not reaching the recruitment statistics. The army's getting smaller. There's a very large desertion rate. And while the goal is to Afghanize the war, I'm very concerned that relative to the sustainability of Afghan national security forces. I'm just not sure how sustainable they are.
Okay, I want to come back to a basic question, but before that, Nasser, you represent the youth of the country. That youth has really suffered decades of war. I think you must have grown in a war region. How does this sound to you?
First of all, I just want to add something. We haven't seen a written version of this strategy, so that was like a speech. 3 points that we noticed which like really beneficial for Afghanistan in the region. First of all, like the U.S. government, they focus on the supporting Afghanistan, and they suggest India to contribute with Afghanistan. Secondly, they want to put like pressure on Pakistan. We haven't seen any pressure on Pakistan. Like we haven't seen this, whether it's called a strategy or not, because we haven't seen a written version of this one. So we haven't seen anything in action. I've seen one thing, when I was listening to this speech of Mr. Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. He clearly mentioned that they will work for their goals. I haven't seen anything in that strategy like they say like we will support the economy of Afghanistan or they will work for the stability of Afghanistan. So the one thing that we noticed that they are here for their own goals and their own benefits. And one thing more like India and Afghanistan relation, I would like to add something about that. Like we have a close relation with India. We have a long history. Somehow there are so many interruptions, like the countries in the region, they want to create some interruption. But Afghans, they are so enthusiastic to make good relation with India, because India really wants to help Afghanistan.
Yes. Well, we'll come to that regional thing very quickly. I just want to end the first segment by saying, in each one line, do you think this policy change or strategy change by President Trump would work for the country or not? We'll come to the region.
I will start by saying, as I said yesterday in my remarks at the Democracy Forum, yes, but with a few Fs. If there is a diplomatic initiative, if there is focus on making sure that political stability and economic stability in Afghanistan are assured, and if what we do at the regional level actually matters and brings change to other people's perceptions and policies. So these Fs are very important, but...
Yes.
I personally think that, first of all, it's not a change in strategy. As I suggested yesterday, I mean, no end state. I mean, the strategy has to have an end state. And I think that 3,000 more additional troops will not make much of a difference. I think the biggest change is recognizing that Pakistan has been a duplicit country. They haven't been a reliable ally of the United States. In fact, many people could say they've actually been an enemy of the United States. So I think, in my reading of this, and I think how history will view this change in plans, policy that Trump introduced in August, is this notion that we want to rely and have Afghan be much closer to India and have India play a much bigger role and punish Pakistan for some of their duplicit behavior. I mean, I'll end with just this one thing. I mean, both directly and indirectly, Pakistan has been responsible because of their support of the Taliban in killing U.S. troops, and we haven't been hardcore. We've let them get away with things. So I think that's the big change is the role now of India, I think. But we'll see. I'm not as optimistic as the ambassador, but I wish I could be.
Okay, I think that will take us to our next segment very nicely. Yes, quickly.
It's clear that where Taliban comes from, where they kill Mullah Umar, and where they kill like Mullah Mansoor, where they found Osama bin Laden. So
which is Pakistan.
Which is Pakistan. It's clear to the world. So instead of sending troops to Afghanistan, why they do not take action against Pakistan? But they should go to Pakistan. Why they were like they want to send?
Why there are troops on Afghan soil instead of Pakistan?
This is going to be the big question of the new policy in terms of, as I said, how it's going to be implemented. What we are hearing is that implementation is going to be gradual, that it is going to be step by step, and that it will be escalated depending on conditions on the ground and conditions of the region. So
just a few.
I think we are, again, if we have this conversation maybe in 6 months or to a year, we might be saying different things about whether it's working or not.
Thank you. That brings very nicely to end our first segment, to question if President Trump has pointed clear fingers towards Pakistan, then why are the US troops in Afghanistan? Why is it not dealing straight away with Pakistan and the intervention of India in the whole region? So we will come to this regional question in the next segment. So please stay tuned on Chai Chat.
Brought to you by Bank of Baroda, India's international bank. Ye Pingo, call more, pay less.